Hey guys, yeah, it's been a while. Um, Hope you guys had a nice holiday. Uh, yeah, I thought we'd do something different today. Talk about some books that are useful for film composers, and I've got quite a few that I've gotten over the years. And I'm probably gonna do like a top five because there are some that I think are more essential than others. But I'll talk about like 7 or 8 books, and then yeah, hopefully it'll be helpful. And you might already have a lot of these books, but I thought I'd just go through them and talk about what's good about each one. So yeah, let's get started. Okay, before we get into the top five, I'm going to mention like 3 books. So this is Knowing the Score by Erwin Bazelon. He had a short career in film music, deciding instead to go into concert music because he was both a concert music composer and a film composer. But aside from that, there's really good stuff in here. Particularly, there's a good history of film music. Also, a lot of good examples in the book from different composers. And he gets more into the technical aspects of film composing. So it's good for that. But it might be kind of hard to find out. In fact, I don't even know how I came across this. Also, he has some great interviews at the end with Elmer Bernstein, John Williams, Alex North. And the cool thing about the interviews is he asks the same questions to all the composers, and they have wildly different answers. So I think that's pretty fascinating. So that's Knowing the Score on Film Music by Erwin Bazelon. So this is a great book. Double Life by Miklos Rosa. He was a Hungarian composer that came to the United States in probably like the 30s or 40s. He was a big part of the golden age of Hollywood. That whole so he was, I would say, one of the pioneers in film music. And what I like about this book is it's more autobiographical for sure. But what I like about it is that he talks about being torn between writing for the concert stage and writing film music. So he kind of did both in his life, and that interests me because that's kind of where I'm at. I do a lot in both realms. So I found this really interesting. And if you're interested in the golden age of Hollywood, like those great composers, I would definitely check this out. Now, if you don't know his work, you probably do, but don't realize it. Ben-Hur, he did Ben-Hur. Also a great movie, Spellbound, which is a Hitchcock film. So he did that. And Double Indemnity. So check out those 3 films if you want to hear more of his music. Yeah, this one might be kind of hard to find too, but actually one of my colleagues at where I teach music gave it to me. I think her mom had it, and then when her mom passed away, she gave it to me. So anyway, that's that one. So the final one before we get into our top 5 is Inside Film Music by Christian Desjardins. So the thing about this is it's just a collection of interviews but actually with composers and also orchestrators. Some of the composers in here are John Barry, Marco Beltrami, Cliff Idleman, Philip Glass, Mark Isham, Cliff Martinez, John Powell, and Christopher Young. So if you're interested in any of those, and there's a lot more actually, it's really full of a lot of great interviews. So this is more a collection of interviews, but really insightful nonetheless. Okay, coming in at number 5 is Knowing the Score by David Morgan. Now this book is unique in that it has some great interviews, but the interviews are all directed towards a certain question or a certain aspect of film composing. Each composer talks about a specific subject and relates it to a specific project that they did. So for example, in Bending the Rules, John Corigliano talks about his avant-garde score for Altered States. So that's really cool. And also I think in that same section, Philip Glass talks about Kowanasqatsi. In another chapter called Period Pieces, Basil Polidorus talks about his Conan soundtrack. And he talks about how, I don't know if you know anything about the Conan soundtrack, but he created like a quasi medieval kind of sound, but also combined it with more romantic kind of sound. So he kind of created an interesting hybrid. And there's also another chapter on orchestration where Mark Isham talks about his score for Cry Wolf, which is a great movie. So yeah, I'm putting this at number 5 because I think I like the way it's arranged with the interviews and how they're geared towards certain aspects of film composing. So yeah, check this out. This is pretty readily available, I think. So I'll try to put links down below, Amazon links where I can find them for these books, or books or something. I'll try to search them out for you guys so you could check them out. You could probably get it used too. I think that's how I got it. So yeah, that's number 5. Number 4 is A Composer's Guide to Game Music by Winifred Phillips. So she's a great game composer. She's been in the business for a long time. And this is a great book if you're at all interested in game music. But I think it's important, even if you're a film composer, just because the game music industry is just taken off and it's just really booming right now. So I think it's in your best interest to try to get into that as well. Personally, I haven't done a lot with game music. I actually started doing one, but then it kind of fell through. They lost funding for it, so that was kind of a bummer. But I'm still trying to get into it. And she actually has some great techniques on how to get work, which is really important. Aside from that, she delves into both the technical aspects of game music, which is very different than composing for film, and also the more artistic aspects. So she covers things like the game playing experience, the importance of themes in game music, interactive music, which is really interesting. So that means, like, depending on what the character in the game is doing, it fires off another musical layer usually. So that's really interesting, and she talks about how to approach that, which I think is really useful. And like I said, like, her chapter on finding work is really good, and she's an incredible person. Like, I talked to her online and she's really super helpful, so I highly recommend this book. Once again, this is pretty readily available, but yeah, it's just a great resource. Really the definitive book on game music, I think. Number 3 is The Music of the Lord of the Rings films by Doug Adams. So this is a great book, especially if you're a fan of Lord of the Rings, the music, also the great work of Howard Shore. But aside from that, I think it's really a critical book for someone who's interested in doing the leitmotif type composition, like Wagner and like that. You know, like Star Wars, like composing themes for each character. And also environments, a setting or whatever. In this case, it's like the different places in Middle Earth. So this is really great. If you're doing like fantasy music or interested in game music, it's really important, I think. Or like animation. It's just so detailed, this book. It's got great examples. And it has all the actual music from the sections, and orchestration. Talks all about the orchestrations of everything. I don't know if you can see that, but it's got his original manuscripts. So it's really great. And just the way he talks about how he combines certain themes and how the themes evolve throughout the films, because I think that's really important when you're a film composer. How do the themes evolve? Like, are they strong enough to sort of evolve into different permutations? And I think in general, that's what's interesting about music, is how things evolve, right? How things change over time. Thematic development is really talked about a lot in this book, and I think it's really important for that reason, even if you're not a fan of the Lord of the Rings stuff. Howard Shore is just such a versatile composer. I mean, he did like Mrs. Doubtfire, then the next year did like 7, so it just shows his range. So I think he's one of my favorites, definitely, of the newer film composers. And what's interesting too is he talks a lot about his research before embarking on the actual writing of the music. So just reading all the books and thinking a lot about each place in Middle Earth and what it would sound like. So I think that's really cool too, because when you start doing like major films, you want to do a lot of research, and that's important to have a sort of vision when you're doing that. So yeah, great book. So that's, for me, that's number 3. Okay, number 2 is The Complete Guide to Film Scoring by Richard Davis. Now, I believe this is the text they use at Berkeley. I'm not sure, but I know he's a teacher there at Berkeley. So this is good. It's not number one, and we'll get to the reasons why, but I think like for an overview and for like getting all the elements of film composing, this is a great book, and I think you should probably start with this one maybe if you don't have anything in your library on film scoring. So this is a good one to start with. It starts with a brief history of film music, so that's really good. And it's a great overview of production. Also talks about the process, meeting with different people in the film world as you get started, like the director and the producer and all that. So there's a lot of stuff in here about the film scoring business, which I think is also very important. And it has touches on genres and writing for different genres, which is really cool. But it's not as detailed and in-depth as my number one pick, but nevertheless, it's really good. Also has a lot of great interviews with different composers. Elmer Bernstein, Elliot Goldenthal, David Newman, and Alan Silvestri. So those interviews are actually really good too. So like I said, yeah, it's really a great book to get started with, I think. Great. I mean, like I said, it doesn't go into depth as much as I'd want, but I think for what it is, it's really good. So I'm going to put it at number 2. Definitely essential if you're going to buy some books on film music. So number 1, I can barely lift this thing. It's super heavy. And it's great. On the Track, A Guide to Contemporary Film Scoring by Fred Carlin and Rayburn Wright. So I'm not sure. I bought this a long time ago, actually, at the Berkeley bookstore. God, probably like in the 90s or something. Went up there and they sold it. So I don't think they still use this. The one downside of this book is like the technical information is pretty outdated. But really that's like a small part of what this book's about. So let me talk a little bit about this. So yeah, this is absolutely essential for if you're a film composer. And in fact, every film project I do, I often reread parts of this just to sort of refresh my memory of it. So I'm always coming back to this. It starts off with the really in-depth explanation of all the parties involved in the filmmaking process. So the director, the producer, the music editor, the film editor, and you're going to meet with a lot of these people when you get some major projects going. So it's important to understand what their roles are in the whole process, because it's really like a team effort, especially when you get into bigger budget films. There's a great section on temp tracks, which none of the other books, well, they talk about a little bit in interviews, but I think like it tells you how to approach temp tracks, how to use it to your advantage. A lot of times a temp track can sort of throw you, but this book talks about how to use it and how to sort of take that information, try to distill the information they're giving you by giving you a temp track and be like, okay, how can I get that feeling without completely copying it or whatever? Because there's a reason why they're putting those temp tracks there, and you need to sort of take that into consideration. And there's also a great section here on styles and genres. So it goes through all different genres like horror, drama, comedy, and it gives examples for each one from actual films. So it's really great. And I think actually that's where this book shines, is all the examples in here, and we'll talk a little bit about that, because there's examples to back up every sort of thing that they talk about in the book. And I think the music is what we're interested in and how it functions in the film. Talks a lot about conceptualization and really like having a vision for the film. So aside from the technical aspects of that, it talks about like how to conceptualize for a particular type of genre or a particular type of scene. There's sections on how to play the drama, how to use melody, how to use harmony, how to use rhythm. It really gets really in depth there. So great book. And a whole section on orchestration and considerations that different composers use for different films and scenes. So for examples in this book, I mean, there's so many in here, but Rocky by Bill Conti, The Omen and Patton by Jerry Goldsmith, it goes a lot into those scores. Close Encounters of the Third Kind, Return of the Jedi, the original Star Wars, John Williams. They're all excerpts in here from that. So I think for that alone, it's worth it. What else? Like James Horner, the Wrath of Khan is in here. A lot of the scenes. War Games by Arthur Rubinstein. Tons more. Also, John Carigliano once again talks about his Altered States soundtrack, and actually they have cool examples of that in here, which the other book was just an interview, but this has actual music from that. So that's my number one pick. I think you know, definitely, if you're to get any of these books from my list, this is the one to get if you can find it. All right, well, I hope that was helpful, and I hope gives you some good reading over the Christmas break. Yeah, we'll see you on the next video.